Not too long before potable water became a commodity that could be bought and sold, its presence in the Indian urban infrastructure was closely associated with altruism and public memory. The drinking water fountains, or Pyaavs, as they are known in Mumbai, were commissioned by respected community leaders to provide clean drinking water free of charge and were often constructed in memory of a beloved family member. With the advent of packaged drinking water and implementation of modern town planning policies, the centuries-old network of Pyaavs met with neglect. Our guest today, Rahul Chemburkar, is on a mission to restore the Pyaavs and activate the space around them to become thriving socio-cultural hubs of urban life. My name is Vaishnavi Shukla and this is Architecture of Center, a podcast where we highlight radical perspectives and unconventional projects that reflect emerging discourses within the design discipline and beyond. Architecture of Center is a labor of love. If you enjoy listening to the show, support us on Patreon so we can keep featuring exceptional people who are venturing into the unexplored frontiers of the built environment.
To start off, can you tell us what the Pyaavs are? And can we talk about how you came across these Pyaavs in a city particularly known for its colonial architecture and Art Deco buildings?
So the Pyaavs are simple drinking water fountains to start with. That's a very simple idea, and that drinking water is a very basic necessity of all human beings, all living beings for that matter. And when it comes to a busy city like Mumbai, right from its initial stages, as we know, the city has a very urban kind of nature, and it is on the move in context to every century. So obviously the need of drinking water has been there, and therefore we, in the colonial times, during the British era, when Bombay was a very busy city then, you can see this interesting drinking water facilities which are in form of very aesthetically created fountains, drinking water fountains, which colloquially are mentioned as Pyaavs. So that's just to start with, to introduce you to the Pyaavs. The word Pyaav also, if you see phonetically, and it has that, we can't say exactly how it must have been originated, but it seems it's a confluence of maybe the colloquial or the local language. Pyaav means pani, or maybe pyas. These are just hypotheses, and then it's not that it could also have, maybe I was discussing with one of my friends who's a social historian. It may have a connection related to maybe aqua. You never know, because the inspiration or this fountains are inspired, or the idea may have been taken from the European drinking water fountain, which you see dotting the streets of countries like Italy or UK. If for that matter, even I think very contemporary drinking water fountains in the States also. So of course you may have encountered a few. So of course I because now people know that I'm working on the fountains. Many of my overseas friends, when they come across, they definitely they make it a point that, okay, Rahul, we saw a fountain today. So I think when it comes, the intrinsic value, I would say, of the Pyaavs is that it's a confluence of the European drinking water fountain and the interesting socio-cultural elements which are inherent to the Indian culture, namely charity and associational value or memory. Because the Pyaavs are funded by many philanthropists in those times in memory of someone very near who has passed away. So you see this dedicated to those near and dear ones. But the interesting thing is that it is for the whole city. It is not only, so even if it is from a community, let's say if it is come from a Kutchi community or a Koli community, it's not that these are meant for only that community. It is for the whole city. And that makes it very interesting, and therefore I every time say that without making it very loud, without having this kind of a declaration that okay, here is the Pyav which is built, etc., etc. It is just humbly standing there and doing its duty, giving shelter or just a resting place and just have a mouthful of water to quench the thirst. But it is aesthetically done. It is not like the water ATM, I call it a water ATM, which you see today in the railway stations of India, where you put some coin and out comes the bottle, but it doesn't have an appealing feel. It's like, it is not inviting. It actually becomes a commercial commodity. But in contrast to this, the Pyaavs of the yesteryears are inviting. They have been free. They invite you and they create a cultural connect.
Right. It's interesting you bring up the question or the existence of the water ATMs, because water is a scarce resource in India, at least potable water is. And we are now seeing water ATMs and such being provided in a lot of public spaces, which are paid public sources of drinking water. But the Pyaavs were originally built with the intention of providing free drinking water. And now with the increased population and the shortage of water supply, what do you think the role of the Pyaavs is, especially in terms of water charity? Like, not looking at the intention that they were originally built with, but in a contemporary scenario where all these other sources exist where you pay for a basic amenity, what do Pyaavs mean right now? And if I can probe a little more, what kind of role can the government and public policy play in sustaining the use of Pyaavs as a free water drinking resource? Because, when we talk about, especially in the Indian scenario, the three main pillars of roti, kapda, and makan, and broadly speaking, air as something that you don't pay to breathe, and water, which until, of course, capitalism started packaging it, was also supposed to be a free resource. Especially with that mindset, how do we look at Pyaavs today?
I will, just like a reverse engineering, I will start with the title which you use, Roti Kapda Makan. Coincidentally, this is a title of a film from the 70s.
Right.
In which a very interesting song is there. It says, Pani re pani tera rang kaisa, jisme milaye ut jaisa. So that actually, is the answer of what we are discussing today. Water doesn't have any color. It is really actually neutral, and it is in a true way, it is liberal.
Right.
So it is not, it is secular, true way. It is not pseudo-secular also. But when the water, means like, I like to quote, our Hindi cinema has done a lot, illustrate many examples. So as Nana Patekar says in one movie called Thoda Sa Romani Ho Jaye, that's a very interesting poem on water. He has come to sell water. पानी जो है अगर चेहरे पे चढ़ जाए तो रौब से रुबाब हो जाता है. Coming back to on a little serious note, yes, today it's very difficult to imagine that we can have free drinking water. But I think it is a kind of a commercially created liability. Means it's very difficult, really difficult to visualize this. But this difficulty, if you see, has sprung up only a little more than 2 decades ago. From the 90s, you see that we started having bottled water.
Right.
So that time, means I remember, now no one remembers this because we have a short-lived memory. So no one remembers that buying water also was something like, okay, why are we, because in the first 5 years of the 90s, which I was in college, I remember when we used to go for study tours, we didn't carry any bottled water. We drank the same water on the railway stations, which is still pure water, nothing more and nothing less. But the way you envelope or package it, so therefore bottled water started becoming, we are not talking of spring water or distilled water, whatever, but bottled water. started being more reliable, because it was actually imbibed on the mindset. So that it is we need to shed our kind of superstitions, and we our kind of that gimmicks. That is one thing which is needed. I may sound a little absurd, but I think it's a reality. Another aspect is that how the Pyaavs can play a role in this. Definitely, yes, the government and the community as a whole needs to actually play a role. I see an opportunity of the Pyaavs playing a role of not only creating water spots, but creating pause spaces which are culturally vibrant. Therefore, I call it cultural pause spaces.
Right.
So someone pauses in the whole city, comes there to drink water, but it is not only drinking water. It's like taking a cultural pause. So you connect with the Pyaav, and while connecting with the Pyaav, because it is creatively designed, it is very soothing to see, and it is very soothing to sit upon, because it's very psychological for us. Just imagine if you drink water, just in the olden days, the water actually used to use your hands.
Yep.
These are all observations, and these are my personal observations. I have created my kind
It's like
of
the act
understanding.
of cupping, where you form a
The
cup
act
with your
of
hand.
cupping.
Yeah.
Slowly, when you start using even a container, a lota actually has more kind of a cultural connect than a plastic glass. Brass ka lota or tambi ka lota has more connect. So today, one of the first Pyaavs which I was lucky enough to restore, called the Keshavji Naik fountain, which is like a big canopy. It is like a chhatri, and the chhatri is like a very
It's a pavilion of sorts.
very pious and sacred place in the Indian society. You have chhatris in dedication of someone. If you go to Indore, you have the Shinde chhatri and many whatsoever. So it is kind of a chhatri, yes, like a canopy, as you mentioned. It's on an octagonal base. Above that rises a shrine. It is adorned by different motifs like the elephant, the peacock, the nandi, or the bullock. And around in between this, the very act of drinking water is created through earthen pots. The water is collected in earthen pots, and a person sits there. He takes out a tambe ka lota, and he takes out the pani and tells, "Saap jal le lo."
Right.
That is the way you actually, that is this. I have experienced this happens today. I am not narrating you a fairy tale. If I go there, the community, the people around that, they very fondly call that place as a favara. Favara again is the fountain. They don't call it. They'll not call it "Are pine ka pani ka ye." Favara. So Pyaav, favara, all these are cultural connects. What I'm trying to say is that all these water spots already are at a very strategic locations in the city. So therefore, as part of the whole revival, my firm Vaastu Vidhaan projects, when we are appointed by the Mumbai Corporation, commissioned to restore Pyaavs, what we did was we created conceptualized a heritage Pyaav circuit, and those are almost like 30 Pyaavs, and we are slowly restoring them. What we found was that already these are at strategic locations. So drinking water facility becomes very like you don't have to justify. The only thing what we have to do is that luckily all these Pyaavs were part of water, during the colonial times,
A
the
network
water
of
which came to
sorts.
when the water came into the city through the pipes. So this had supply, water pipe supply. But it was through gravitational. That time the water was just flowing. Today you have to supply water through a water tank. Luckily, Mumbai city has potable water. Today also many people drink direct water. But still, to be safe, we are having industrial filters. So we did another experiment with another restoration of the Pyaav, where we have installed a industrial filter. We pulled a overhead tank, underground tank, and we facilitate that a continuous water flow is started. Pyaavs today really could be instigators and facilitators as mainly drinking water fountains, at the same time creating cultural connect and socio-cultural tourism also. So, it's like multidisciplinary. You provide drinking water facility, you create opportunities in terms of spots where the tourism can flourish. At the same time, the whole social hierarchy, the social connect through various, people who used to provide water, people who used to, there could be job opportunities, like you would actually have some security around the Pyaavs. So these are all things which can slowly, it's like an ecosystem. You save the Pyaav, you save the city.
We hope you're enjoying this conversation with Rahul. For our next episode, we have Clemency Gibbs, a doctoral student at the Bartlett whose work focuses on facadism in London. Here's an excerpt.
Conservation practice, at least in the UK, hasn't found really a satisfactory way to connect the use of an average building, not like a grand, not a grand building, just an average building that you might not necessarily look up twice at, but is historic and has some level of interest just due to its age usually. But we haven't found really a way to connect the use of these buildings with their heritage value, partly because the use of a building is often transitory.
Don't forget to meet us back here in 2 weeks.
I wanted to go back to your practice because you mentioned you've been working with the Bombay Municipal Corporation and with the government a fair bit. And in your practice of restoring the Pyaavs, a significant aspect of the project is the creation of cultural spaces around this Pyaavs. And to me, this was really fascinating because when we look at typical restoration projects, we tend to isolate the object from its surroundings and focus on the upkeep only of that which is restored. So we're kind of not looking at its neighborhood or what lies around it or anything but that thing that is restored. It's almost like a gem that's polished, but you're not looking at anything else. And even in the case of the Pyaavs, one could just have restored the Pyaavs and left it at that, hypothetically speaking. But you have a very different take on how a Pyaav could become a locus of cultural activities in a particular neighborhood. Tell us more about this approach of kind of extending or the idea of, extrapolating the idea of restoration not only to the object, but the context or the surrounding or the neighborhood within which it lies.
Okay. When the first Pyaav which I restored, when we actually landed on the site, I saw it in a very dilapidated condition. Like it was encroached upon. It was quite almost like 2-storied high canopy structure and almost a meter high plinth on which it was resting. There you can imagine in a city like Mumbai, this space has so much value. So obviously it was encroached upon. I'll not use the word encroach. I meant that it was the people around were owning it in their own way.
Right.
I'll put it in a very positive way. Because, in that dilapidated condition also, person used to sit there and he used to give water. But the conditions were not in the way you would say very aesthetic or the way it used to be. There was a tea stall, or which we call a chai ka tapri, on the steps. This fountain has a clock also in the shikhar. Almost like 150 to 200 square feet, 150 square feet area where a person can aram se, slip. So obviously a person had created his accommodation there. That way it was encroached upon, and a very interesting tree was growing out of the whole. Yeah, you can imagine the whole illustration in front of you. What I observed was that, so we started the work there. We quarantined that whole Pyav. We started the work in that busy street. Slowly the people also actually, they took it very positively. We thought that they will actually start opposing to it. No, they were very positive. And when we actually completed the restore, people were awestruck and they said, okay, ye tha. This was what we were, this was in midst of our whole locality, and we were not aware of this. And there was a Jain Derasat who actually funded it. So that was the first public-private funding which happened to any fountain in the city. They actually had a big event of inauguration. They called the CM, they called the chief minister to inaugurate it. There was a red carpet, there was ribbons around it, they cut the ribbon, they lined up to drink water. It was like celebration. They started owning it in their own way, but in a positive way. And therefore, I was very pleasantly surprised when I came across a pamphlet of a grocery shop in that locality. And the grocery shops have their typical way of, printing the pamphlets. Whatever, यहाँ ये मिलता है, यहाँ पे गेहूं मिलता है, I get rice, I get this, I get that. And they have some interesting kind of, some, in their way, they have their own aesthetics. They will put some, some heroine or some TV star or some actor's photo. What interested me was that the pamphlet in the central place, this Pyav was printed. And that was a very positive note that the society actually connects with it. What can heritage conservation or heritage restoration do? That actually gave me the answer that, or else what are we doing? We actually, when we talk of heritage restoration or heritage conservation or heritage in totality, don't we sometimes go into a utopian world of ourselves? do we create a disconnect, or instead of creating, I'm not saying today I'm not saying it's a pattern everywhere, but still I think more has to be done to connect to the society. Of course, many efforts have been done from all the sectors, definitely I know that, but I found a very different way that allow the participation of the people. They understand what exactly has been done, and they take the story ahead. You have to just be a mediator, and I think that is what we are as a heritage enthusiast and an architect. I think I am a custodian of what has been done by the previous generation, and I have to just take it ahead for the next generation. And therefore, I think the society, we don't have to actually do much. We have to just do a bit that, okay, I have restored the Pyaavs. Now, you only create a kind of a module, or you create a kind of a system in which it goes ahead. But that system should allow people participation. Now, how that can happen? I make it a point, I go to these sites. Whenever someone comes there, they want to see something of Mumbai, I make it a point that I take them to the site, but not as a very celebrated heritage walk. I take them very casually. Okay, you have a stroll, you go there and you land up there. The people there, they greet me, Saab aa jao, jal le lo. That actually, creates a connect.
I completely get that our role as designers, as architects, is that of an enabler almost to go and reset and recharge this infrastructure that was always there. But I also constantly keep, wondering why it died in the first place. Like the community within which these Pyaavs live, they were always there. Now everybody gets excited once you restore them. But if they've died in the past, how do we ensure that it doesn't happen in the future? Because the times change, sometimes the people change, but a lot of these places, people have lived there for generations and they literally see it every day. So why do they need...
I will not shy away from this question. I will answer you very...
but why do you need somebody from the outside to come, this very savior complex of look what's there in, what you have, and, you should rejoice this and it's a wonderful thing, and then suddenly everybody's proud of it. But why does it go back into the cycle of death and decay?
So definitely we are not the enlightened one that we came and we actually enlightened the society. First thing, as I told you, I'll not shy away from this question. I experienced that after I restored, the two examples which I gave you are really case studies to me. The Keshavji Naik fountain is still there. The people are, the trust is there. They appointed a security.
Yep.
So therefore, a little upkeep, it is being maintained. A very contrasting example is of the another Pyav which was abutting a kabutar khana. As you know, the kabutar khana has its own cultural kind of importance.
Do you want to just explain what a kabutar khana is for everybody who's not from India? Because it's fascinating.
Yeah, I know. So therefore I'm saying in the Indian society, kabutar khana is a place, a designated place, if I technically decide, for bird feeding. And specifically bird feeding, I don't know how the kabutars land, or the pigeons. Kabutars are pigeons, as we know. But the pigeons have their own kind of, health hazard, which is very consciously taken up by many environmentalists in the city and all over the world, I think, and mainly in India, that the kabutar khanas today should be history because they are becoming a kind of a liability in terms of health hazards. But to define the kabutar khana it's a designated place for bird feeding, mainly especially for the pigeons, because it is considered pious in many societies, many communities. So the grains are poured there or they are spread over in that designated place. Another Pyav called Kothari Pyav, which is very strategically located right in the fort area, opposite to the general post office. It is a mixture of a kabutar khana or a bird feeding area and a Pyav, a drinking water fountain. So when again there was a lot of encroachments, etc., I will not go into that details. We restored both the kabutar khana and the Pyav, but we took care also that we tried to the design itself was very beautifully done, that you could segregate that through small dividers. The birds would not come very near to the fountain. After it was inaugurated, what I had been behind a corporation. Unfortunately, the maintenance agency backed away, and then there was not a proper maintenance was not done. And today and suddenly the lockdown also started. And what happened because of that? Slowly, the people who were taking care of that kabutar khana, they increased again. They shifted the dividers. Then one end of the oval, the Pyav was there. So therefore, because the bird feeding activity started becoming more aggressive, you can understand the bird droppings, etc., started happening near the Pyav again. And the cleaning also was not done. So the Pyav, which was restored very elegantly, the water supply is still going on. But today you can't really go there and drink water because it is lacking the maintenance.
Right.
So therefore, what we have done now is that when the restoration of any Pyav would happen, the technical way is that there are tenders which are floated by the Mumbai Corporation. We being the conservation architects do the whole tendering. So we put a clause that the contractor itself will do the maintenance for 3 years. So that's the first step, that the Pyaavs will be maintained. Because today you need to take that care, as you rightly mentioned, that there are two aspects. One is negligence, other is that people are not aware how to maintain it. Now coming to the other part is that how this Pyaavs actually landed up being ruins, in their ruined state. There are two reasons mainly. One is urbanization. You see the use of Pyaavs stopped after the free water flowing stopped. When the waters went into the households through pipes, initially, in the suburbs of Mumbai, if you know the city of Mumbai, it's a metropolis today. So there is a metropolitan region of Mumbai where you have the island city, the main city, and then there are the eastern and the western suburbs, the central and the western suburbs. So those suburbs were mainly rural areas or semi-rural areas. They had water spots in town, drinking water facilities in a natural way, like the wells. They had wells. Today also there are wells. The city of Mumbai also had a lot of wells, sweet drinking water wells. Okay. Partly question and answer which is hidden in your question is that why we should ask that why the Pyaavs are only limited to the island city of Mumbai. Why they are not, if you know the city, or just to illustrate the city for our listeners, that Mumbai city actually has grown linearly from south to north. Kulaba was the southern tip, and then from there towards the north, so the city has grown. east to west, the city has not grown much. The suburbs have grown afterwards. So from south to north, on the north side, there is a place called Sion, which is called, it's the border of the island city of Mumbai. You find the Pyaavs only in this island city because that was the city which was main into the governance of the British. Afterwards, even though it grew, the villages in the suburbs had their own water points in form of the wells, and they didn't need any Pyaavs. What happened was that till the 70s, Mumbai city also, if you see through the water infrastructure, all the households started getting water. That was one element, that public drinking also mainly to that extent must have reduced. So slowly the water supply also started getting receded. So today you have only 2 to 3 hours continuous water. So therefore they became remnants of the past. Slowly, when it is not in use, they get started used, getting a little abused also. Or maybe the period of, maybe the post-independence period, if you see, slowly there is lot of urbanization happening. The main focus is mainly on urbanization. The revivalist or the more conservationist or the heritage kind of, revival, you see coming up slowly from the 80s. So till that time, not only the Pyaavs, many street furnitures, like the Pyaavs, the milestones, lamppost, benches, manhole covers, which were of the yesteryears and which had lot of aesthetics. Because slowly, if you see in the olden times, there is aesthetics at a very micro level.
Yeah.
You find a very simple kind of a commemorative stone which is very elegantly carved. Today it's done very technically. So therefore, till the 70s or the 80s, 1980s, you see all this going into distress. And then Mumbai being the first city, they decided to draft a kind of a heritage resolution, and we had the heritage list coming out in the 90s. There was a lot of documentation which was happening, and as part of the whole documentation, many of the drinking water fountains also found place in the list. But still, it had to be something like the first decade of the 21st century that slowly we started understanding that, okay, these are something which could be revived as facilities. So that's the whole history, that how they got into distress and how slowly they are getting revived.
Very, very, very fascinating. I did not know that aspect, because mostly, somebody who does not know the backstory would always think that these things, because of changes in technology, because of changes in infrastructure, or just ignorance would go into decay. So you are associated with the Mumbai Water Narratives and Confluence, which is supported by the Living Waters Museum. And their galleries highlight the various intersections of water with the built heritage, with people's livelihoods, culture, equity, and public health. Can you elaborate a little on the work being done by you and your colleagues at this confluence? And we'd also love to know what is next for you.
So, Living Water Museum is a very interesting and a very intriguing kind of initiative. Sara Ahmed, who is the founder, who is the main backbone to this, last year, many of us were contacted in the city in our capacities, who were working in different capacities towards water. And it was like tangibles and intangibles of water heritage. To be very specific, so Mumbai Water Narratives mainly was the term coined as for specific the version for Mumbai of Living Water Museum. We contributed in creating this virtual walk for the first online initiative event called namely Confluence. That is what you are mentioning just now. So we actually created a virtual walk of one stretch in the city which had different drinking water fountains or the Pyaavs, and we created a kind of a short video, short documentary talking of the Pyaavs, because that was one aspect of water where there were a lot of tangible, but it had a lot of intangibles in it. So if you see the Pyaavs, it is if it doesn't have a lot of intangibles in terms of the socio-cultural aspect, it doesn't make sense actually. And the intangibles, as I mentioned to you in the outset, is that mainly the charity and associational value. What is next? The way it comes. I have been trying to connect with counterparts in India. Of course, I have my own profession. We are into heritage restoration, Vaastu Vidhaan projects. But Pyaavs has become a passion of me and my team also. Interestingly, when I traveled to many places in India, after I came to know, became conscious of the Pyaavs, I found similar kind of, initiatives or examples in many cities. Like in Pune, you don't have a Pyav, but you have Hauds. Haud is a kind of a, cistern, or maybe a kind of a water container, a stone water container which is created at different locations in the city. And Pune city had, during the Peshwas, there was an aqueduct which was created, and water was brought from one lake outside Pune to the city. And still the water was flowing till now it is flowing. So then when I went to Jammu 3 years ago, I found some cast iron pillars along the street, and it had those contemporary Jaguar taps connected to it. So I asked them, what is this? They said these are nalkas. They look like decorative fire hydrants, but those were drinking water facilities. So what I found was that there are examples. Maybe Mumbai city stands separate because it has this interesting drinking water fountains, but I think this initiative can be taken up at many places. So I am trying to connect with the counterparts. Maybe now friends like you could also be the facilitators, or maybe abroad also in Europe, in UK, where we have this drinking water fountains. I'm trying to just check that can we start initiate some kind of interaction, just to know it, that okay, there are Pyaavs in Mumbai, there are drinking fountains in Italy, and how can that could be very insightful. I don't know the way ahead. Maybe that's just one step. Interestingly, there is Sir Kawachi Jahangir, who has donated most of the Pyaavs in Mumbai. He has donated one Pyav in Bombay called the Crawford Market. Today it is called the Mahatma Phule Market. So there are few Pyaavs, and there is one interesting fountain. There is this fountain which is very beautifully carved. It looks like a cathedral, and its replica or a twin brother is there in London, which is donated by Sir Kawachi Jahangir. So that is what I'm trying to see. Now coming forward to this other Pyaavs in Crawford Market, just for your information, if you land up in Bombay, and now I will take you on a ride. There is another Pyav which has a crown on it. There was some donation collected by the shop owners, and when the king actually visited first time in Bombay, that is actually created a Pyav. And there's an interesting Pyav and a fountain. I don't know, it's a leisure fountain or a mix of a Pyav, which is sculpted. It is called a immersion fountain, which showcases the flora and fauna of Southeast Asia in those times. And the interesting part is that it is sculpted by Lockwood Kipling, who is the father of Rudyard Kipling.
Oh.
He was the dean of Sir J.J. College of Art.
Wow, that's a very interesting piece of trivia. But I can't wait to see what's to come next, and I will definitely ring you the next time in Bombay. Now we have it on evidence on the podcast that you're going to take me around. So very excited for that as well. Hopefully travel becomes easier and that we get to meet in person.
Let's hope. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, Rahul. I'm very glad I came across your work, and I'm so glad you're here to share it with everyone.
It's my pleasure that I was able to share such insights which have excited me. And so these are cultural waters which we should allow to flow, and that should actually connect. The rivers should connect someday. at some place.
Special thanks to Ayushi Thakur for the research and design support, and Kahan Shah for the background score. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Arc of Center, and we would also love to hear from you. So do drop in a word at our website arcoffcenter.com. That is ARCHOFFCENTRE. And thanks for listening.